Hi, I'm Richard Maraj, Senior Minister at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center, and I want to thank you for visiting our website and for tuning in to today's message. If you feel inspired by today's talk, I really encourage you to make a donation by hitting that button below and making a contribution to this ministry. It'll allow us to continue these messages online and to do the great work we do here at Unity of Phoenix, which is to inspire people to live better lives. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for your support, and we hope to see you at a Sunday real soon.
Morning again, everyone. And a shout out to everybody who tunes in and watches us online. Today, we continue with our series on relationships called Complaint-Free Relationships. And it reminds me of this wife that was sitting peacefully on her cozy armchair sewing her husband's socks when her husband comes in and glances at what she's doing and immediately starts badgering her. Honey, be careful, the needle, it's sharp. Please watch what you're doing. I don't want you to poke yourself. I don't want you to cut yourself and be hurt. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't look up when you're sewing. Now just go slow, nice and even stitches, go slow down. And the wife, in shock and disbelief, puts down her needle and thread and looks at the husband and said, "What's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Don't you think I know what I'm doing? Do you know how many times I've sewn your socks before?" And the husband sits down next to her and he smiles and he said, "That's exactly the point I'm getting at. Do you know how many times I've driven a car before?" Okay. It's one of those slow release jokes, it'll hit you on the drive home, it really will. So, how many people here have ever complained about someone else's driving? Anybody ever? And how many people would admit that with the amount of complaining that you do in life, that most of it tends to be about what other people do or other people say, other people? And how many would admit that there is probably at least one relationship or maybe a couple in your life that it would be good for you to not complain quite as much? You know, it's interesting that studies show that the most harmful thing we could do in any relationship, whether it is with a spouse, with our children, a coworker, a neighbor, the worst thing we can do is to complain. In all of its forms, from criticizing to judging, to arguing, to nagging, that all of those forms are literally toxic. They diminish and they damage all of our relationships. Complaining is annoying. Complaining turns the person who does the complaining into a more negative person. It makes the person who is being complained about feel attacked, unworthy, and eventually they start just tuning out what the other person is saying. It is draining and exhausting and literally robs us of intimacy and connection and joyful, positive experiences that we could be having instead. You know, they did an interesting study about how to improve a relationship. What are the things that improve relationships best? And you know the thing that improves relationships best is just eliminating the negative stuff. Reducing complaining improves a relationship more than adding positive stuff. More than flowers or date nights or buying somebody a coffee, or even doing compliments, that reducing the negativity raises and improves the quality of a relationship more than anything else. You know, in Corinthians it says, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And the reason it's the greatest thing is because that is the thing that we all seek more than anything else in life, is that we all want to be loved. We all want to experience love in all of its forms, to feel appreciated, to feel cherished, to feel valued, to be honored, to be appreciated. All the different ways. Everybody wants to feel love. We want to feel that connection. We want to feel that bond. We want to feel that sense of oneness. And the greatest way that we experience and express and enjoy love is actually through relationships, through our connections with people. And the truth is, as much as we want loving relationships, it's not easy relationships. People have different ideas and different habits and different perspectives and styles that sometimes creating as nurturing and loving and harmonious relationship as we'd like, as we all would like, isn't always as easy. And to create these kind of relationships we're all looking for that are happy and fulfilling and nurturing, it takes work. It takes effort. It takes patience. It takes understanding. It takes compassion. It takes honesty and authenticity. Today we are looking at how do we continue on that process to have complaint-free relationships, relationships that are healthy and fun and nurturing and fulfilling for everyone involved. And we're in week 2 of our 3-week series, and it is based on a book by Reverend Will Bowen called Complaint-Free Relationships. He wrote a book called A Complaint-Free World, and then realizes the thing we complain about the most are relationships, so he wrote a book on complaint-free relationships. Last week, in part 1, we talked about relating in relationships, that all relationships are based on what we tell ourselves about other people. That the people who we like, we say, well, they're kind, they're wonderful, they're positive, they're bright. And the people we don't, the things we tell about them is they're mean or selfish or rude. But the thing is, there are other people who think positive things are the ones that we struggle with, and ones who have a difficult times with the one that we like. And the fact is, what is the truth? And the reality is, it's what we tell ourselves about others in relationships, and sometimes we make up stories that they aren't true. So we need to open our minds to be more aware and to be aware of the things that we're telling ourselves, and sometimes to have compassion and be willing to see things from a different perspective to create healthy relationships. So today we're looking at getting our needs met, because everybody wants and deserves to have their needs met in having a happy and fulfilling relationship. But when we are in a relationship and it doesn't work, what we tend to do is get our frustrations out by complaining, by saying what we don't like, what isn't working, what we don't want. And even though we use complaining to try and get our needs met, it doesn't work. Complaining actually makes things worse. It perpetuates the frustration. It keeps us mired in the problem and creates what's called the dissatisfaction complaint cycle. When we're dissatisfied, we complain. And the more we complain, the more we're dissatisfied. And the more we're dissatisfied, the more we complain. And on in a never-ending cycle. And so the question comes to all of us is, why do we engage in complaining when studies show it doesn't help? And in fact, it makes things worse. Why would we continue to engage in an activity that just doesn't help and takes us further away from the level of fulfillment and having our need met in a relationship? Why do we complain to get our needs met? It is the same answer to the question, why do babies cry? Babies cry because they're dissatisfied with something and they don't have the verbal skills to express and articulate to get the things that they need. Except adults have the verbal skills, they just choose to react to dissatisfaction with complaining rather than figuring out exactly what's really going on and to express that. The number one reason most people don't get their needs met in relationships is because they don't ask. They don't share what's really going on with them, and they don't express what their desires and their wants are. We often would rather complain than ask somebody for what we want or express what it is we really desire. And it's like we don't understand or don't believe that we can get what we want in a positive, calm way instead of yelling or complaining. Sometimes we think saying, you are such a mess and a slob, you leave your stuff all over the house, rather than saying, I would really appreciate it if you'd help keep the house clean and put your dirty clothes in the hamper. And it sounds silly, but think of how often we go to the complaint as a way to satisfy our needs rather than sharing what's really going on with us. Or we fall to that old one that says, if you really loved me, you would already know what I need. That is the idea of thinking that a partner is or should be psychic, should read our mind, and know what we want with us having not to say a single word. And we tend to do that a lot. The reality is we are 50% of a relationship, but each party is 100% responsible for that relationship and 100% responsible for how we show up in that relationship. And the number one thing we all need to do in relationships to improve them, to make them healthier and get our needs, is we need to learn to ask and to express our desires. Scripture says clearly, ask and you shall receive. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and the door will be opened unto you. Most of us feels we can't get our needs met. We think we're hopeless, we're stuck, and we don't have the power to improve it. Yet, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be opened to you, says you do have the power. You have the ability to speak and to ask and to express your desires, and that is the healthiest and the best path for attracting or creating the level of fulfillment that we really want. But rather than speaking directly to the person, which is the healthiest way to do it, what do? We talk to someone else. Upset with our spouse, talk to our friend. Upset with the boss, talk to our spouse. That we tend to turn to someone else rather than the very person who would be the one to help resolve and fulfill the actual need that we're seeking. And the question is, why? Why do we do that? Sometimes we think, I would rather die than share, And why would we do that? And here's the blunt answer. It is that we are emotionally and spiritually immature. We allow fear that we create in our head. Oh, they'll dislike me. They'll be angry at me. They'll reject me. They'll leave me. All these kind of other things that we tell ourselves instead of just being upfront and honest. We let those things get in our way of just sharing what's up with us. Michael Beckwith says the lowest level of spiritual growth is victimhood. Thinking everyone else is bad and they're taking advantage of us. And everyone else has power over my life and I have no power over my life. That is the lowest form of spiritual growth. You know why? Because it's not true. Every one of us has a spiritual power to speak, to hold thoughts, to take actions, to use the power of our prayer to bring forth. Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you've received it and it will be yours. It shows how powerful we are, that we can create amazing and wonderful things. And the fact is, yeah, we could turn to some people and tell us what big of a jerk our boss is, and you can get 10 people to unanimously agree that your boss is a jerk. And guess what? That gets us nowhere in terms of the solution. In fact, it gets us a little further because we've expended energy to get 10 people to agree with us about something negative. And it doesn't help us at all. So the question, what would help us? Here's what William Arthur Ward said. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. And the realist adjusts his sails. If a relationship isn't working for us and we aren't getting our needs met, guess what we need to do? We need to adjust our sails. We need to figure out what is it do I need to do to help myself get my needs fulfilled and the other person's needs fulfilled. Somebody once said that we teach people how to treat us. And if someone's doing something that isn't working for us and we say nothing, we are tacitly telling them, that's okay. That's how I want you to treat me. And so we are responsible 100% for how we show up in a relationship. And if we want to show up and get our needs met, we have to be willing to share what's really going on with us. So here are the ways that we can do that, the action steps. The first one is we got to be aware. Eckhart Tolle says the most powerful thing to change and transform your life and improve your life is you got to be aware. If you're not aware of what needs to be changed or what you need, then it makes it harder to change and transform and improve your life. So the first thing we need to do is just to notice how often we use complaining rather than just asking for what we want to get our needs met. And often, here's the good thing about complaining, is that complaining is a sign at some level of an unmet need. That when we're complaining about something, it's because something in us doesn't feel fulfilled or connected. Here's a reason that we don't usually think about of why we complain. Sometimes we complain because we don't get enough attention. When we're not getting the attention, we're not getting a connection or affection or eye contact or some bond between someone, sometimes we'll complain about anything. We'll complain about how they chew their food or leaving the toothpaste cap off of it, how they dress or how they drive or other things like that. We will get cranky about anything and complain when we need to really ask ourselves when we complain is, so what need in me is not being met? What feels like it's missing or something that I'm yearning and want to experience more of? You know, another reason sometimes we complain is that if we're feeling insecure and scared or disempowered, sometimes we'll put someone down and saying they're incompetent or they're weak or whatever to make ourselves feel more powerful. When if we looked at the complaint, what's really going on and what need is not feeling met is that maybe we're not feeling supported. Maybe we're not feeling confident. Maybe we're not feeling worthy. And so it takes some awareness on our part to look at the things we're complaining about and go a little deeper and say, what's really going on with me? What is it that I'm seeking? What is it that I'm needing? What is it that I need to ask for? That make sense, everybody? Okay, the second one is that sometimes we need to process what's really going on. Now, sometimes we think process means venting, but venting and process are different. Venting is really complaining. It is complaining and stirring up about how bad they were and how much they wronged us. You know, couples who complain and yell and argue, they tend to have more anger and more likely to have another argument. You know, and they actually say that when we get into arguing and yelling stuff, it creates some dopamine rush in the head, and it almost is like a strange high, and it reacts almost like a drug or like with having alcohol. Now, the best way to resolve anything is talk to directly in a heart-centered way with the person you want to improve the relationship with. But sometimes we might need to talk to someone else to process. And someone else to process is different than talk to someone else to get them on your side, to tell them how bad the other person is, or to get together with someone to plan your attack of how you're going to give them a piece of your mind. That's not processing. Processing is speaking to a neutral person to help you understand what your feelings were, what need felt unmet, and how you can choose some positive options to help the relationship be healthier and more successful. And for that to work, you have to have a belief that the person was trying to get their need met, and they didn't intend it to hurt you, but they were just trying to get their needs met and didn't know better. That you're both wanting something better. That you have to go from that positive premise. Because blame reduces us from being a change agent when there's blame involved. And processing is about processing us, processing what's going on with us. You know the interesting thing about systems? One person changes in a system, and the whole system has the opportunity to change. But someone has to be willing to change. Kind of reminds me of this mom. She was making pancakes for her two boys. The older boy was 10 and the younger boy was 7. So she made some pancakes and gave the first pancake to the kids, and they're both fighting over it. And the mom sees them fighting and thinks it's a good time for a moral lesson. And so she says, what would Jesus do? What would love do right now? And the mom said, what love would do is let the other person have the pancake. The mom walks out of the dining room, and the older brother grabs a pancake and says, you be Jesus. And and in relationships that aren't working, we want the other person to be Jesus, don't we? And the fact is, as a change agent, as a powerful spiritual being that you are you willing to step up and accept that responsibility to be that agent of change? The person to step up to act from a place of love, to act from a place of peace and joy and reconciliation by asking ourselves the question, what could I change in my approach or my outlook to help improve this relationship? What can I do differently that will bring more harmony and peace to this situation? You know, it's interesting. They did this study about anger and levels of anger with couples. And they found that when they describe events in the relationship that get them angry, and they use a higher voice level and an intensity, that their anger level increases, their blood pressure is higher, and their heart rate is also increased. And then when they describe the same events or other events in anger, but they use a normal voice and just say, I was really angry and upset about that, or I felt hurt or betrayed, but just used a lower voice, but still owning and acknowledging their feelings, guess what? They had less anger, lower blood pressure, and a slower heart rate. It's not avoiding your feelings, but not getting too intense and letting that anger boil. We actually keep it calm, and you get a more calm perspective, and you process the upset and frustration easier. The third thing we need to do, and this is the big one, is that are you willing to share where you are honestly and ask for whatever need that you are seeking? And this requires you to take a risk and be vulnerable, to be honest, to say, I'm hurting here and I could use a little bit more encouragement and support. Or I would really appreciate if instead of trying to fix me, that when I say these things, if you could just listen to me and say, I really support you and love you right where you are. That we need to ask and look deep of what's in. But I guarantee you, when we ask in an honest, sincere, open-hearted way, it is the best chance to get the level of fulfillment that we're both looking for. It's scary, But the thing is, if we want to experience real love and a deeper level of love, we have to be willing to risk and not share on a superficial level with the people we know we need to share more honestly with. Greg Bear calls it real love. Real love means sharing where you're honestly at so the person will love you, not the image of who they think you should be or you think they should be. Are you willing to go a little deeper and just share who you are and what you want? That is the healthiest and most effective way to get what you would like. And then the final one is to give that listening and give that desire and be willing to accommodate the other person's needs. Allow yourself to listen. Make a commitment to stop complaining and choose to support. Even think in advance, something you know that they like, and do that. We should have as much enthusiasm for the other person's happiness as we have for our own as well. Scripture says, by the measure you give will be the measure you receive. There's another scripture that says, take care of your needs, but also take care of the needs of others. Everybody remember Zig Ziglar at all? He used to lie and he'd say, you can have anything you want if you help enough people get what they want. And the fact is, every one of us deserves to have our needs met. The question, are you willing to show up in a bigger way and to show up in a more loving way and a more giving way to help those relationships heal and get better and be more harmonious? Aristotle said this, men who acquire a particular quality do so by constantly acting in a particular way. You become just by performing just acts, temperate by performing temperate acts, and brave by performing brave acts. And so by us being more loving, more compassionate, and more open-hearted and not complaining, but instead sharing where we are, what we need, our lives will be far more fulfilling. Every one of us deserves to have healthy relationships. Every one of us deserves to have our needs met. And we can choose to complain, but complaining doesn't change, transform, or improve a relationship. If it did, people who complain the most would be the happiest people in the world. I have not found any studies to verify or support that. So the other choice would be to own and accept the power and responsibility to be aware of what our needs are. And instead of complaining, be aware, process what we need to, and in a healthy way, share what's going on with you and ask your partner to fulfill your needs. And you equally being willing to listen, to support, and to help them get what they desire. Love is what we're all looking for. We all want it, and if we do, we got to go a bit deeper. And if we do, we will truly get our needs met. God bless you all.